Welcome to Becoming a Modern Man. This is the first one I've done in a good while. I'm going to be running Green-Black Rock in Modern, and this first matchup is against Grixis Death Shadow, which is obviously one of the more popular decks in the format, so it should be an entertaining one. Yeah, let's get underway. So this is our opener. We've got a couple of hand disruption spells, Inquisition, Thoughtseize, we've got Tireless Tracker and a Tarmogoyf. We've got Verdant Catacombs, Ghost Quarter and a Forest. So fairly solid hand. Hand disruption's always good, particularly against unknown opponents. Gives us a lot of information right off the bat, and obviously can help us disrupt what our opponent's planning. Tarmogoyf's always a good follow-up to hand disruption. It's a good way to grow your Tarmogoyf is by binning something into your opponent's graveyard. And Tireless Tracker is just a good, solid threat, really, that can give you some really good advantage over the long game. So we're just going to lead off here, get an Overgrown Tomb and Thoughtseize our opponent. So I rushed through that a little bit too quickly. So our opponent reveals this hand, Lightning Bolt, Death Shadow, Fatal Push and 4 lands. Fairly sure he's on Grixis Death Shadow on the basis of that hand. So it's a little bit of a tricky choice. I end up going for the Fatal Push to protect my creatures, I guess. I think in hindsight I should have gone for the Death Shadow. It's a very big threat, it's a very dangerous long-term threat. He doesn't have any of the creatures in hand, and Grixis Death Shadow is sort of light on creatures. It does run a decent number of creatures, but they're kind of difficult to cast and not usually played in sort of multiples, so definitely not looking to swarm the board. I think in hindsight, I think I probably would have taken the Death Shadow rather than keeping. Rather than taking the Fatal Push. So yeah, I'm not sure about that choice in hindsight, but that's what I went for. So opponent draws into a Street Wraith, cycles that immediately, and drops the Bloodstained Mire, which we already know about. Draw into a Grim Flayer, which is decent. We're going to drop the Tarmogoyf here, because it's a nice 4/5. Which is good for getting beatdowns early. I'm just going to crack a Tarn. Watery Grave leads into Inquisition, which isn't great for us. But it can either take our Inquisition or one of our other threats, and ends up taking the Tracker. Cracks the Mire into Watery Grave. And now he can drop his Death Shadow, which obviously means we can't Inquisition. Yeah, I think possibly part of my plan in taking the Fatal Push was to sort of lead into an Inquisition to take the Death Shadow, but unfortunately our opponent was able to cast it fairly quickly, and now it's on the board. We can't get rid of it. So yeah, I definitely regret not taking the Death Shadow. Let's just update this. So draw into another Grim Flayer, so we've got lots of threats, which is good. Can drop the Grim Flayer. Going to play the Ghost Quarter, and then we're going to crack it against the Forest to get a Swamp. Basically just maximising our turn, so we can run out this Inquisition, which should take out the Lightning Bolt from our opponent's hand, just to protect our Grim Flayer. So take the Bolt, and our opponent's hand is just 3 lands, which is obviously very good for us, but he does have a Death Shadow. Going to attack for 4 here. Kind of tricky to decide sometimes when you're playing against the Death Shadow whether you should be attacking or not, because obviously it increases the size of their Death Shadow. I think this attack's reasonable. Makes his Death Shadow big, but not terrifyingly huge, and we're going to be playing another creature soon, so he's got to contemplate whether he can really take the crack back. Opponent plays a Blood Crypt, plays it tapped, so he isn't interested in reducing his own life total. We draw Liliana, which would be great. Kind of makes me regret using that Ghost Quarter to crack my own land, but I think protecting the Grim Flayer was right. But for drawing this Liliana, so I think fairly reasonable play. Plays Colourhand's Command, so we end up having to discard the Liliana, but on the plus side, it does mean we get Delirium on the go, so our Grim Flayers become 4/4s, and our opponent is now tapped out at 8 life, and we've got 5/6 and 2 4/4s, so he is just dead, unfortunately. Yeah, I think our opponent concedes here, because he can't do anything about that situation, unfortunately. I think that went pretty well. Again, but for, I think, Thoughts not taking the Death Shadow on the initial Thoughtseize, I think that went to plan. Opponent didn't draw a whole lot and kind of was a bit flooded on lands, and we managed to finish out the game fairly swiftly. So that worked pretty well. So let's go on to game 2. So, see sideboards come into play. I've got Damnation here. It's mainly just to get rid of the bigger threats our opponent has to play, which maybe can't be fatal pushed, etc. Or, just a good way to get rid of some of the other larger creatures they play. Collective Brutality, a good card. Lots of utility there. And then we've got Dark Confidant, Scavenging Ooze. Ooze can be good in this matchup, gets rid of Snapcaster spells, can also get rid of Death Shadow, so Colourhand's Command can't just return a creature, etc. So there's quite a lot of uses for Graveyard Hate against Grixis Death Shadow. Also can make Devil spells harder to cast, I suppose, but possibly not quite as relevant. Hunt leads off with nothing in particular, just a Blue Delta. We can play Treetop Village here because we've got nothing to play on turn 1. Deck's not really big on 1-drops. There's Hand Disruption and there's Fatal Push, and that's really it. A lot of our creatures are 2-drops. So opponent's not done anything yet. We're going to run Scavenging Ooze out here because it's probably the most expendable creature. So certainly, at least in terms of size, and I think if we can stick this Confidant, that would be a pretty huge boost for us in terms of getting card advantage. So as I expected, the Scavenging Ooze ends up eating a Fatal Push. Publish Liliana Last Hope, which isn't great for us, particularly as we don't really have much of a board presence at the moment to get rid of it. Treetop Village is definitely a good thing here, though. In theory, next turn we could attack for 3, put it down to 1, but I think we probably just want to try and get some sort of board presence going. Liliana also not good because Dark Confidant just dies to its +1, so we're just going to run out the Tarmogoyf here, as I say, just to get some board presence really. So we draw into this Nihil Spellbomb. Can try and attack here into Liliana. Our opponent has Snapcaster and a Fatal Push. Flashback gets rid of our Goyf. Kind of makes me wish I played this Spellbomb, but I think probably our opponent would have Snapcasted and Fatal Pushed in response to me trying to cast it, most likely. So we have a few options here. I end up going for the Collective Brutality. I think I pitched Damnation because it's not looking like it's going to be super useful here. So just to kill off the Snapcaster and then let's take a look at our opponent's hand. Opponent responds with a Thought Scour, which hits a Young Pyromancer and a Collective Brutality. Young Pyromancer is not a card I see a lot of in Grixis control. Quite an interesting one to bring in. I suppose going wide is fairly good against our deck. And yeah, that's good play for our opponent. It means our discard doesn't hit anything, and we see our opponent's got Death Shadow and a Snapcaster Mage. So maybe getting rid of that Damnation wasn't so great after all. But here we go, and we just play out the Spell Bomb here because we've got nothing better to do. Well, as I say, we could play Confidant, but it's just going to die. So I think we just pass the turn here with Spell Bomb. So yeah, looking pretty bad for us. Obviously, opponent's got an active Planeswalker. His hand's pretty stacked as well, and he's got a Snapcaster to back it up. Go for the attack here. I mean, I've seen my opponent's hand, so it seems unlikely that he would have want to block. Basically, the only card he could have here is a Street Wraith, which would allow him to lose life at instant speed. Oh, that or bolting himself, I suppose, would also work. But it turns out he drew a Street Wraith, which seems kind of unlucky for us, and means that we are going to just lose our Treetop Village for no particular profit, which is not great. From Thought Scours, gets taxes for 5, 7. 7 down to 10. We're going to crack this Spell Bomb. We draw into Thoughtseize, which is not very useful. Exile our opponent's graveyard and draw into land. So yeah, that's pretty much game. Not a lot we can do here. So yeah, it didn't go particularly well. The early Liliana was not great, and yeah, we didn't really get going. Didn't draw particularly well, and our opponent had the threats to finish it off, unfortunately. So yeah, not a great game 2 for us. So let's go into game 3. Let's see if we can fare a little bit better. So here's a hand. It's not bad, obviously. We've got Inquisition to start off. Hopefully clear the way for a Confidant, follow up with a Liliana, which would be nice. Certainly sticking Liliana could be very good for us. We can whittle down our opponent's hand potentially, and then obviously the sacrifice effect is fairly good against a deck that's not necessarily light on creatures, but it's kind of runs a small number of powerful creatures generally rather than a whole host of them. So, just missed that there. So we've got our opponent's hand is double Snapcaster, Nihil Spellbomb, and a Collar Hands command. I end up taking the Collar Hands command, which seems reasonable. Taking one Snapcaster could be okay. Not too concerned about Spellbomb, as our hand doesn't have any Tarmogoyfs or anything in it that would make that hugely relevant. So yeah, definitely really between taking one of the Snapcasters or the command. I mean, pitching this command is not so great because he has Snapcaster, but that's kind of a long way off, potentially. Snapcaster Collar Hands command, so Snapcaster with no spells in hand is not the best, and I suppose that's probably the reason why I end up going that way. Probably would do the same, I think, if given the choice again. Not overly scared by Snapcasters, particularly with no spells in hand. So yeah, I mean, the other good thing about obviously seeing that is that our opponent doesn't appear to have any removal in hand, so that is good for us. He draws into a Street Wraith, which he cycles, and Bloodstained Mire is going to lead into Cyril. Oh no, the Spellbomb. Okay, that's fine. Draw a second Confidant, which is very good. The card advantage off Confidant is great, and our opponent may not have removal now, and if he doesn't have it, if he does have it now, then our follow-up Confidant is still going to look pretty good. Opponent cracks a fetch, cracks a spell bomb. That down to it, yeah. Okay, so we know he's got 2 Snapcasters of Steam Vents and 3 other cards. And he just passes a turn, which is obviously very good for us. Can get some value off of this Confidant. We're drawing to Tarmogoyf, which is good. Currently a 4/5, which is pretty nice. And we've got a Windswept Heath here as well. So got some options here. I'm just going to lead with attack with the Confidant. Put our opponent down to 10. And we can have a Liliana here, or we can play a second Confidant, or we can Tarmogoyf. Best use of our mana is playing Liliana, and it might just be the best thing in general. I think it's pretty good here. Opponent's not got a lot going on, and I think we can start whittling down our opponent's hand. So we discard. I'm going to discard this Damnation. Perhaps it wasn't a particularly good sideboard card here. I don't know. It could have come in useful. I was kind of anticipating longer games where this might be a good way to wipe the battlefield, but it hasn't really come to pass in this particular match anyway. So we discard. Our opponent pitches a Steam Vents and leaves himself with 2 Snapcasters and 3 other cards. So yeah, looking pretty good for us. We can get rid of any big creatures with Liliana, and obviously we've got a fairly good card advantage source in Dark Confidant just being on the board. And yeah, our opponent concedes actually. So yeah, that went pretty well. Opponent really didn't get going. Obviously didn't find any removal to get rid of our creatures after we took the Collhands command, and Liliana picking the board was pretty much wraps it up, making it very difficult for him to get back in the game. So yeah, worked pretty well, and we managed to pick up the win against one of the major decks in the format.